Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is VEMITALIA. I would like to present my proposal, and the title is Students' Perceptions on Using Google Classroom as an Alternative Media for English Learning at MTS 2, Pekanbaru. For the first chapter is Background of the Problem. In many countries, COVID-19 or coronavirus has become the root cause of the problem. This pandemic has brought general problems to Indonesian citizens, industry, economic, and especially education. Due to this pandemic, most schools, universities have stopped face-to-face teaching and have stopped social and physical distancing. Therefore, through online learning or technology-driven learning, the teaching and learning process at home, especially English learning. According to Mustafa, 2015, the use of technology in foreign language learning and teaching is useful for both teachers and students. There are many types of learning applications, one of which is Google Classroom. Google Classroom is a free application designed to help students and teachers connect, work together, organize, and create assignments. It makes learning paperless. According to Amadea and Dahesihsari, 2015, some problems of e-learning are that the implementation of e-learning is still limited. It is only used for assigning and submitting tasks. And the most common challenge is poor of internet connection. There are some possibilities when e-learning is only used to provide assignments and collect assignments. The lack of understanding of the function of online learning is becoming one of the reasons. Lack of connection is also becoming a major problem for students and teachers when learning online. This reduces students' motivation to learn using e-learning. Based on preliminary research, the researchers conducted through the interview of the students at MTS Muhammadiyah 2, Pekanbaru, it was found that the English teachers use various kinds of platforms of English lesson. They use platforms to give attendance, materials, and assessment. Usually, in the use of a platform between students and teachers can do online groups in the WhatsApp application, and then they are changed the photos related to the material. Next, the identification of the problem. For the first, what are the factors that make the implementation of e-learning using Google Classroom is still limited? And the next, what are the factors that make students unable to operate Google Classroom properly? And then the limitation of the problem. The researcher will focus on students' perceptions on using Google Classroom as an alternative media for English learning at MTS Muhammadiyah 2, Pekanbaru. Next, the formulation of the problem. The first formulation is, what is the students' perceptions on using Google Classroom as an alternative media for English learning at MTS Muhammadiyah 2, Pekanbaru? And the second, what are the factors that influence students' perceptions on using Google Classroom as an alternative media for English learning at MTS Muhammadiyah 2, Pekanbaru? Next, the objective of the research. The first objective is to find out the students' perceptions toward the use of Google Classroom as an alternative media for English learning at MTS Muhammadiyah 2, Pekanbaru. And the second, to find out the factors that influence students' perception on using Google Classroom as an alternative media for English learning at MTS Muhammadiyah 2, Pekanbaru. Next, the significance of the research. For the English teacher. The results of this research are expected to provide English teachers with information on how Google Classroom as a means of learning English can help and benefits for students in the process of learning English. If Google Classroom can provide help and benefits in the learning process, then the use of this media by teachers in the teaching and learning process, especially in English learning, may become an alternative option. And then for the other researchers, it is expected that this research will be helpful to other researchers and provide a reference for those who want to conduct more research related to the use of Google Classroom. And the last, for the readers, this research can improve readers' knowledge of English learning and new perspective by using Google Classroom. Next, the reason for choosing the title. For the first reason is Google Classroom is one of the social network that connect teachers and students for teaching and learning activities. It also helps the teacher to use an online media when teachers and students are in situation that makes it impossible to do direct learning. And online learning activities can continue continuously until an unpredictable amount of time depends of this virus problem. Hence, it is important to find the best platform to teach the students. This could be demonstrated by knowing the students' perception of the platform while the online learning activity is in use. The second reason is the title of the research is relevant to the researcher's status as an English education department student. And the last reason is the location of the research supports and facilitates the researchers. The last is definition of terms. For the first is perception. Perception is someone's interpretation of something based on their previous experience. And the next, Google Classroom. Google Classroom is a social network designed to serve a tool to facilitate students and teachers during the teaching process, allowing them to connect and collaborate with each other. The last is a learning. A learning is a learning that uses electronic or technology-driven media to access educational courses and support the teaching or learning process provided online. As we move to the chapter 2, review of related literature. For the first, theoretical framework, and there are technology for teaching foreign language. Technology for teaching foreign language, according to Mustafa 2015, affirmed that technology is an educational facilitation tool from which teachers and students can get many benefits. Next, a learning. Based on Arkovel and Abaido 2014, a learning refers to the use of information and communication technologies to allow access to online learning or teaching resources. Next, Google Classroom. For the first is definition of Google Classroom. Iftahar's 2016 states, Google Classroom is considered one of the best platforms to improve teachers' workflow. And according to Muslimah 2018, Google Classroom is useful for all categories of students and also for adult learners. It also has some benefits, such as being paperless, accessible from anywhere as long as there is internet connection, communication between teachers and students, feedback to students, and personalized learning. Next, using Google Classroom on teaching learning English. According to Lynch 2018, Google Classroom has the following benefits. For first, accessibility, and then paperless, and then times. Next, the features of Google Classroom. Google Classroom, we can make the announcement, we can make reminders, and the important point, Google Classroom can make the assignments for students, and we can make create these questions between students and teachers. And the last, how to use Google Classroom. Okay, for the teachers, for the first, you can install the application and then you make a class, and the last you can add the students. And for the students, for the first you can install the. Next, perception. The definition of perception by Muslimah 2018. Perception is a process in which people are exposed to stimuli and then interpret them meaningfully based on their previous experience. And according to Nur Rahman 2018, perception is a word closely related to human psychology. Also, Walgito 2010 states perception is the process of organizing and interpreting the stimuli that an individual receives in order to becoming something meaningful. Next, students' perception. According to McGoldrick and Cavery 2009, student perception can be understood as the ability of students to form their own opinions and distinguish them from the studies presented in the class. Next, perception on using Google Classroom. Rozak and Al-Bantani 2018 discovered that this application gives lecturers and teachers the opportunity to explore scientific ideas for students. And from Alim et al. 2019, Google Classroom has discovered that it can also minimize the cost of cheap stationery and the other materials and minimize the energy released. And the last, factors influencing perception. According to Samuel 2016, the factors that make up perception can be divided into two categories. For the first, internal factors. Internal factors that make up perception are the individual things that influence the formation of perceptions. And the next, external perception. External perception occur around an object or person and can affect the perception of the object. Setiana 2012 mentions perception affected by functional and structural factors. Functional or personal factors can be factors related to an individual's understanding of the effects of the generated stimuli, or can be described as benefits of the generated stimuli. And structural or contextual factors are external factors that influence the individual understanding of existing stimuli. Next, the relevant research. For the first research conducted by Mihalova 2005, the key problem areas for the lecturers in relation of e-learning are a lack of time, a lack of interest or motivation, a lack of cooperation, a pay system that doesn't take into account the particular of e-learning, and lecturers' concerns regarding the quality of virtual teaching. And the research conducted by Elsaut et al. 2014, and the problem that found are the lack of motivation of students, and some students may difficult to understand the contents of the e-learning process. Okay, the next, operational concept. The operational concept is used to give limitation to the theoretical framework in order to avoid misunderstanding and misinterpretation in this research. Okay, the variable in this research, only one variable, is students' perception on using Google Classroom as an alternative media for English learning. To operate the investigation of the variable, the researcher worked based on the following indicators as cited from Aber and Halil 2020. The indicators are students' perception about the usefulness in using Google Classroom, students' perception about the ease of use in using Google Classroom, and the last, students' perception about the access in using Google Classroom. Okay, we move to the next chapter, method research. For the first, research design. This research use a quantitative method because it is based on aims and needs of the research, according to Ari et al. 2010. And specifically, this research used descriptive quantitative design, according to Roni Merga and Morris 2020. Next, time and location of the research. For the time, this research will conduct after seminar proposal in February until March 2022. And for the location of this research is at MTS Muhammadiyah 2 Pekanbaru, which is located at Sikandi Street, number 207, Pekanbaru. Next, subject and object of the research. For the first subject of the research, the subject of the research is the 9th grade students of MTS Muhammadiyah 2 Pekanbaru. And the object of the research, are students' perceptions on using Google Classroom as an alternative media for English learning. Next, population and sample of the research. For the first population, the target of the researcher are the 9th grade of the students at MTS Muhammadiyah 2 Pekanbaru, and the total of the class of 9th grade is 6 class, and the total of students are 206. Next, sample of the research. In order to have a well-represented sample, the researcher took 25% of the population, and the researcher used the random sampling to use this research, and the total of the sample are 52. Next, technique of collecting that data. In collecting the data, the researcher gave questionnaires to students and asked them to fill the questionnaire. And the last, technique of analysis data. After collecting data, the writer will analyze those data based on the student's questionnaire by using simple formula as well according to Hassan 2003. That's all my explanation of my proposal. I'm sorry for my mistakes. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.